closures in the downtown area. And then Mayor John Cooper and Chief John Drake will speak with you briefly about our 5 officers, and then we'll introduce the officers to you. First, Chief Swan.
Good morning. So just to give a quick update on the infrastructure, as we work with our federal partners, law enforcement partners, and the footprint shrinks as far as the investigation, they will release the properties back to Metro. Once that happens, we will do a preliminary sweep. We'll have our Public Works, Codes Department, Fire Department, along with all utility districts that will go into the affected area just to make sure that it is safe. Then we will release that back to our business partners and residence owners. So I'm happy to announce this morning between 4th and 5th Avenue down to Broadway will be open. So as of 10 a.m., we will release that. We're doing the sweep right now as far as our preliminary sweep with all our partners I mentioned earlier. We'll let our business partners come in. That liaison will be from the Office of Emergency Management working with our downtown partnership. As far as the communication update, we know that AT&T yesterday, as of 8:30 last night, they've restored all the mobile communication. And then this morning, they got back into the workflow, and there will be times where we will lose communication because they are trying to restore the 4th floor. At the 4th floor, that will get our critical infrastructure back into play. And that's internet, along with landlines and our 911 system. They're feeling very confident by the end of the day they will have us up and running at full capacity. But please remember that there are a lot of moving parts and there are a lot of things that happens, and we will try to address that as it happens. So again, we appreciate everybody's patience, and we will proceed with getting Nashville back on the road of reopening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And then very quickly this morning, I just talked to Senator Blackburn, and she was reporting to me on a conversation she had with the President. Grateful to her, Governor Lee, the delegation, Congressman Cooper, Fleshman, Rose, that federal help will be a priority here for rebuilding in Nashville. And of course, it needs to be. Our businesses have suffered a lot with COVID, and this doesn't need to add to that difficulty. And so everybody's working together really well to try to make that happen as quickly as possible. Today I want to recognize our 6 officers who saved lives here in Nashville. It's a great thing that our city has such heroes. Officer Llewellyn, Tapping, Cypress, Wells, Hosey, Sergeant Miller. You know, their actions saved lives, and I think they may consider what they did was just a regular part of their duties. But we in Nashville know it was extraordinary, and it's thrilling to have them in our community, and we need to recognize their heroism. I know they're not accustomed to all of this publicity, but it's marvelous that we can celebrate the courage in our community. And the entire nation, I think, is grateful and deeply interested in hearing from them. And with that, let me turn this over to our Chief Drake, to do the introduction. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Before the officers say a few words, I'd like to reiterate that we feel Nashville is safe. There are no known threats against this city at this time. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. I want to talk about our men and women of our police department who do heroic efforts every day. But on this particular incident, officers responded to a shots fired call, and unknowing anything else at the time, they began hearing announcements that something was about to detonate coming from an RV. Immediately, they didn't think about their own lives. They didn't think about protecting themselves. They thought about the citizens of Nashville and protecting them. And they went about knocking on doors, and had they not made their efforts, we'd be talking about the tragedy of people and lives lost. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to our heroes. They may not think they're heroes because they go about this job each and every day, but they are our heroes, and they had a really heroic effort that morning. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our 5 officers. Sergeant Miller is traveling out of town this morning and couldn't be here, but these 5 officers behind me graciously agreed to speak with each of you. What I've asked them to do is to come up one by one and talk about their response on Friday morning, starting with the officer who arrived first and then the other officers in that order. First, I would like to introduce you to Officer Tyler Llewellyn, Central Precinct overnight shift. Officer Llewellyn.
Hello everyone, I'm Officer Llewellyn. Initially we got a shots fired call. I was running zone that night, so I took it. Officer Hosey backed me up. I arrived on scene. Initially I didn't hear any shots fired, nothing like that. We were told that shots were coming from inside the building at 178 2nd Ave North. Upon arrival, I checked because it's a liquor store slash apartment complex, an Airbnb that has the same address. Checked the bottom floor, couldn't see anything immediately, couldn't hear anything. At that time, I requested a code to get access into the building. Was waiting on Officer Hosey to show up and the code. Shortly after Officer Hosey showed up, as soon as she got out of the car, almost immediately, the RV started making an announcement. Somewhere along the lines, don't quote me exactly, but there's a large bomb within this vehicle. Your primary objective is to evacuate. I wasn't quite sure what I heard, so I looked at Officer Hosey just to verify we heard the same thing, and then it started over. At that time, I called and notified Sergeant Miller. He said, get everyone you can out there. I requested all units available from our precinct to come. They show up. I asked Officer Toppin and Wells to block off 2nd and Broadway, 2nd and Commerce. They did. Officer Sipos and Hosey went inside to start knocking on doors, and Officer Wells came up. At this time, Sergeant Miller's there. I asked him for any further directives, stuff like that. At that time, we set up our cars to kind of set up as much of a barricade as we can, keep people out. We go inside. Just before we go inside, probably about 5 minutes after we're there, I'd say that the timer then started counting down. Officer Hosey and Officer Wells are the first ones that noticed that. In between this, I did look at the RV, noticed that all the shades were down, and kind of walked around it to see if there was a tag, anything like that, to try and get more info. I did not notice one. From there, myself, Officer Hosey, Wells, and Sipos went into the building and knocked on all the doors we could to notify as many people as we could that we had a possible public safety concern and that we needed people to evacuate. We noticed that there was a basement exit, so we asked everyone to go down and out the basement. We essentially made contact with, I believe, 6, 7 apartments and asked them to evacuate. The rest, we never got an answer, so we moved outside and tried to move down the street. I went northbound towards the hotel up that way, and Officer Hosey, Sipos, and Wells continued southbound towards the other places. From there, pretty much sometime later, the music started, and I notified over the air to notify other officers, and then after the song, it continued to go back to the announcement for a little while. After it switched back, I did notice that there was a gentleman and his dog that came out of 217 2nd Avenue North. I noticed him. I went up to him to notify, hey, you need to get inside, notify anyone you can, and please evacuate. Shortly after that, the explosion went off. I got knocked to the ground. I immediately got up. Luckily, no injury, nothing like that. I noticed a gentleman in shock with his dog. I checked on him, got him inside, went back, checked on Sergeant Miller, who was inside his car at the time. He seemed all right. I opened his door. He was cutting his airbag that went off away. Then I ran down, noticed Officer Hosey putting out radio traffic, and I noticed Officer Sipos, to my left. At that point, they seemed okay, so I ran forward into kind of the debris area. I noticed what appeared to be 4 people that came out of, I believe, 178 2nd Avenue North that we weren't able to get contact with. They seemed in shock and in awe of what was going on. At that time, to get their attention, I yelled at them and told them they needed to get to safety and run. They took off running northbound on 2nd. I'm not sure where they went from there. From there, I did a quick sweep of the road and everything else, see if I could see anyone else, and I noticed that the other cars were on fire in the area. Wasn't sure if possibly they were going to explode too, so at that time I pulled back and resources started coming to us, and I just assisted the best I could with keeping people back from that point. So that's essentially the role I played, and I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you, Tyler. Officer Brenna Hosey was the 2nd officer on 2nd Avenue that morning. Officer Hosey is a 4-year police department veteran and also assigned to the midnight shift at Central Precinct. Officer Hosey.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenna. Like Tyler said, we got the shots fired call, so I was going to back him up on 2nd Avenue North. As he said, as soon as I got there and stepped out of my patrol vehicle, we started hearing the announcements being made. Kind of had that confused look on, is this really what we're hearing right now? After he notified Sergeant Miller, we were trying to think of the best way of action. We were making sure the entry code worked. As soon as Sipos showed up, he and I started knocking on doors, waiting for Sergeant Miller and everyone else to arrive on scene. We were able to clear the 1st floor, and then Sergeant Miller, in his thinking, had us come back out and move our patrol vehicles to a more strategic position, so if we needed to go back to our patrol cars, we wouldn't be affected at all. So I'm giving him credit for that, for probably not only saving our lives, but saving our patrol vehicles and the way that he had us positioned. So we go back in, start clearing floor by floor on the 2nd Avenue North apartments. Once we made contact with everyone we could and made sure that they were getting out of the building is when we started to move down, keeping in communication with dispatch, trying to get entry codes for all the Airbnbs that were on 2nd Avenue North, trying to make entry. At this point is when we heard the 14 minutes until detonation announcement, so we're moving as quickly as we can. We make it all the way down to 2nd and Commerce. There's actually a B detail officer that I'd been in contact with that lives in one of those apartments, asking him if he was okay, telling him what was going on, and then if he could start helping evacuate people out of his building, because we did not have access to it at that point. Once we'd made it to 2nd and Commerce, we realized there wasn't much else that we could do once we evacuated and made contact with everybody that we could. So I told everyone it's probably best that we just go back to our vehicles and regroup until the bomb squad gets out there and we figure out what we need to do from there. At that point, we had heard the 3 minutes until detonation. So myself, Llewellyn, and Sipos had headed back northbound on 2nd. I had made the turn onto Church Street while Tyler went to go talk to Sergeant Miller, and that's when the explosion happened. I was thrown forward, knocked to the ground, but I was able to catch myself. I was fine. At that point in time, I tried to get the air, but Amanda had beaten me to it, letting everyone know, or letting dispatch know, what had happened. I made a phone call to a loved one to let them know that I was okay, and then I ran to the intersection to check on Miller and Llewellyn to make sure they were okay. Saw Sipos running towards the intersection as well. That's what I got on the radio to make sure Wells was okay. Couldn't get a response from him, but from the blast he had some hearing loss. So that's when Amanda got on, said that he was okay. So I was just trying to make sure all of our people were okay, and then going from there, trying to figure out what was the best course of action to keep everyone that was either in the immediate blast area that we weren't able to evacuate, or anyone that was coming in, and how to best keep them safe.
Now I'd like to introduce you to Officer James Wells, also assigned to the Central Precinct midnight shift. James has been with us just under 2 years. Officer Wells.
Good morning, Officer James Wells. Shortly after the shots fired call came out, Officer Llewellyn had came over the radio and said I needed everybody here immediately. And just by the tone in his voice, we knew it was serious. And he said it was a possible bomb situation, and that Sergeant Miller was aware. At the time, I was sitting right next to Officer Toppin, so we got over there as quick as we could. Not knowing that the RV was the vehicle in question at the time, we actually pulled right in front of it. So this is right across the street. We pulled up, and then when we heard the announcement, Toppin was like, "Is that the vehicle in question?" And Llewellyn said yes. We immediately hopped in our cars and backed out, and then so we started setting up the perimeter to start shutting down Commerce and Broadway to make sure nobody could come in or out. And then Llewellyn called for more people to come help evacuate the building, which I did. At that point is when I heard, you have 14 minutes to evacuate the area. And at that point is when I started to prepare my mind for secondary things to happen. I actually told everybody when we come out to make sure we look at the high ground and the parking garages, just in case, as I felt like maybe an active shooter might have followed that, just because it felt, at that moment, it felt real, and it felt like there was going to be some secondary activity. So every time we came out of the building, we made sure that we were looking around and checking high areas, just making sure nobody was peeking around and looking at us. So we continue to go door to door, trying to get codes from dispatch to get in. We get down to Second and Commerce, and that's when we hear the 3 minutes as we coming out of the building. And at that point, I told them I was going to go back to my car and get my heavy plates, just mentally getting prepared for whatever was about to happen. And so as I'm putting my heavy plates on, Llewellyn tells me that Sergeant Miller told me to pull my car back because I was actually in the intersection at first. So then I pulled my car back in between the buildings, and which is the parking garage, and then Second and Commerce to get out of the blast radius. And at that point, I get out, and I'm starting to go back toward Llewellyn and Hosey. And as I'm getting ready to walk toward them, walking back toward the RV, and this might not be politically correct, but this is my truth. I literally hear God tell me to turn around and go check on Topping, who was by herself down on Broadway. And as I turn around, for me, it felt like I only took 3 steps. And then the music stopped, and as I'm walking back toward Topping now, I just see orange, and then I hear a loud boom. And as I'm stumbling, because it rocked me that hard, I started stumbling, I just tell myself to stay on your feet, stay alive. And I just take out in a full-out sprint, and I'm running toward Topping to make sure she's okay. And we kind of meet in the middle, and we just grab each other, check each other, and I'm yelling at her to get her gun out, because, like I said, I felt like there was going to be some, it just had a feeling that, it's just weird. It just felt like something out of a movie. And so we're checking on each other, and she's asking me, she's telling me that they're trying to raise me on the radio. I couldn't hear, so I just lost temporary hearing in my left ear. So as she yelling, I'm saying what, and a couple of explicitives, tell her I couldn't hear. And they get me to the paramedics. I call my wife immediately to let her know, just before anything got out, to let her know that I was okay. And while I was in the ambulance, they were trying to get me to go to the hospital, and I just didn't want to be by myself at that moment, didn't want to leave them. And then I heard that there were 3 people that were injured, so I told the paramedics to take care of them. And I was like, per policy, I got 10 days to get checked out. So it's like, y'all go check on them, go check on the civilians. And then I immediately went to go find Topping, just kept asking where Topping was, and we found her, and that was my part in it.
Officer Michael Sipus, assigned to the Central Precinct's midnight shift. Michael's been with us also just under 2 years. Officer Sipus.
Thank you. So I was I believe the third or fourth officer on scene of what at the time was a shots fired call. I pulled up in front of the building that the initial call came from. Didn't know at the time I was almost directly across the street from the RV. Exited my vehicle, heard it making the announcements, essentially telling us there was an explosive device in the vehicle, not to approach it, that we should be evacuating the area. At that point, I moved up the street a little bit, at which point I met up with Officer Llewellyn, Officer Hosey. We started making plans to get into the buildings, start knocking on doors to let families know what was going on, and get them out of the building. I don't know the address off the top of my head, but the first building we went into was the one that the initial call had come from. Between myself and all the other officers knocking on doors, I think we made contact with 6 or 7 families, informed them that they needed to exit the building to the what would have been the First Avenue side to keep them off of the street with the RV. After we worked our way through the initial building, knocking on doors, we went back outside, at which point we started working our way southbound on 2nd Avenue North. Like these other officers said, we were in communication with dispatch, who did a fantastic job through the whole incident, trying to get door codes to get in and alert more families. I believe we made it into one more apartment building, if I remember correctly. I don't think we made contact with any families in that building. At that point, Officer Llewellyn, who was outside, let us know that the recording had changed. I believe that's when a song started playing. I don't know what the countdown was at that point. I know by the time we made it back outside after the last building we had checked, it was down to 3 or 4 minutes, I believe. At that point, we decided to work our way back up 2nd Avenue northbound. We had decided, like Officer Wells said, to get our heavy plates on to prepare for whatever might come after the countdown ended. At that point, I made it back up to Church Street. I rounded the corner to head towards First Avenue, where my car was parked. I'd actually just popped the trunk on my vehicle to get another piece of equipment out, at which point I just felt a push, basically. I was thrown into the trunk a little bit, turned around to see just a very orange sky and a lot of smoke. At which point I ran back towards 2nd Avenue North, as all the other officers did. Just wanted to make sure all the officers that I knew were in the area were safe. Like Officer Llewellyn said, there were a few people that had come out of an apartment building, so we did our best to get them out of the area as quick as possible. At that point, we just spent time keeping residents that had come outside, as well as pedestrians that were just trying to enjoy their morning, keeping them away from the area, trying to carefully explain what was going on and that they just needed to stay away for safety. Thank you.
Our 5th officer is Amanda Topping. Amanda has been with us for just under 2 years, also assigned to the Central Precinct's midnight shift.
Man, they got me closing this thing out. Oh my God. All right. So I remember that morning, I was sitting with James Wells. We were talking over in my zone, and I heard Tyler Llewellyn and Brenna go out to the call. So we're kind of listening. This is an odd call. So we're sitting there, and my wife had just called because it's towards the end of our shift, so she was seeing what time I was coming home. And so I'm talking to her, and I'm like, well, we're about to head to this call. It's a little strange. So I hung up with her, and we head down there, and we get there. We didn't really know too much about it. Unbeknownst to us, we park right next to it. So of course we moved because that seemed ideal. So, you know, I take my car down to 2nd and Broadway, and you know, Sergeant Miller wanted me to stay down there to help with, because, you know, pedestrian traffic on Broadway, and, you know, the buses were starting to do their routes and stuff. So of course I was listening and everything, and they went up to the apartments, and I kind of stayed down there and kept on going up to 2nd and Commerce to hear what the RV was saying. And that's just stuff that I'll never forget. You know, the sound of the announcement saying, you know, primary objective is to evacuate now, and it's a female voice, and yeah, it's just odd. And then of course, you know, I'm kind of pacing back and forth because I kept on having to turn pedestrians around. It was a weird feeling not being able to be with everybody else, but I knew that, you know, I needed to stay where I was at. Because, you know, you want to be with your detail, especially when you just have a feeling something's not right. And something that weird, just, you don't get stuff like that. So, but I was standing there by my car, and I heard Tyler say that music just came on. So I got, you know, I went to go get closer, and I heard it, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I was about to get on the radio and say, you know, I know it's almost not my place, but like, everybody's getting out of the buildings, right? We need, like, I wanted everybody to be safe. But then I saw a group of them, which I couldn't really tell, but I was assuming was Brenna and Cypos and Tyler, walk around the RV back towards their cars. So I kind of saw them. And I started walking up to 2nd and Commerce because I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to know, like, do we need to go to more buildings? What do we need to do? You know, I was just getting really antsy. And I just talked to my wife again. Just told her that things were just really strange. And so, but as I'm walking towards them on the right side of the road, the right side of 2nd, I see Wells at his car. And I was like, well, he's closer, and I'll go talk to him, see what we need to do. So I don't know what told me to do this. It was really weird, but I decided to change my direction, go on the other side of the road, start walking towards Wells. So as I start walking towards him, you know, he starts walking towards me. You can see on the camera too, the footage, I've seen it. And I told him I didn't think anybody would ever believe him, how close he was. And I was probably about 10 steps away from him, 15. And we're just walking towards each other, and I just saw the biggest flames I've ever seen, the biggest explosion. I mean, and I just saw orange, and then him, and I saw him stumble. And I felt it, I felt the heat, the wave. And I don't know how I kept my footing, but I kind of blanked and I couldn't see him for a second, and I just lost it, and I just took off in a sprint towards him. And like he said, I've never grabbed somebody so hard in my life. I grabbed him, he grabbed me, and we just ducked into a doorway because we didn't know what was coming afterwards. And I'll never forget the windows shattering after the blast all around me. It kind of looked like a big prop from a movie scene, all the glass breaking at once. You know, it hit me all over. But just being able to hold him and grab him, and then the first thing I could do is, you couldn't hear anybody at first. It scared the heck out of me, but you know, just 423, there's been an explosion, and sent multiple medics because I didn't know what we had. And I was so scared that I just lost my entire detail because I didn't know where they were. I just saw them pass by it. So after that, we just, you know, made sure that we felt a little bit safe enough to go back and regroup. And luckily I heard everybody on the radio, and I didn't know how okay everybody was, but I knew everybody was alive. And so I was happy to hear that nobody else was seriously injured, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, can I go now?
All right, these officers have agreed to take just a few questions. Please, if you have a specific officer you want to ask of, identify that, or if you don't have a specific officer, we'll try to find the best one.
Where the bomb squad was? The Metro bomb squad, were they on the way?
Yes, the bomb squad was on the way. The bomb squad had been requested and they were on the way.
Officer Wells?
Ma'am, right here.
Oh, yes. When you described that there were shades on the RV, were there shades in the front as well? Did you ever see a person in or around?
Sir Llewellyn.
Yes, ma'am. The front had a shade as well to keep view completely obstructed. All the shades on the back windows were down as well, so you couldn't see in at all. I didn't see any person in or around it at all. When I first arrived, I did notice RV, but with it being Christmas, I was like, maybe they're just visiting family and parked there. So I didn't pay much attention to it, but I did not notice anyone outside around it either when I first arrived. There, to my recollection, I went around behind it, just double check after the announcement started to see if we could get a tag for more information and stuff like that. I did not notice a tag anywhere. I didn't notice any kind of bracket for a tag even. So, unfortunately, couldn't give more information. Yes, what I specifically remember, and we found out later, what I remembered was downtown where the lights shine bright. Later, the ATF agent I spoke to pulled it up, and it's downtown by Petulia Clark was the specific song that was played.
I'm sorry, kind of speak up for me.
You talked about a moment where your thinking kind of changed and things got real. As you're hearing that audio recording, you're hearing 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
No, it wasn't a consistent countdown. It was like, hello, this is a warning. For your safety, evacuate the area. And that looped for a few minutes. And then as we were getting ready to go in the building, it changed to, you have 14 minutes to evacuate the area. And that's when my mindset changed, and we started looking at the building. And then there was also cameras on the RV, like surveillance cameras above the mirror. So you got the hangover part that hangs over the windshield. I'm sorry, I talk with my hands. And so you got the hangover part, and then you got the rearview mirror here. The camera set in between that. So it just, it felt like whoever was behind it was watching it. For me, it felt weird. All of the cop lingo that you hear about the spider senses, about the hair standing up the back of your neck, all that went through my body, and it just immediately the training kicked in that we do as far as staying calm, but being vigilant and watching around us. So that became my primary objective, is to, as we're evacuating, also looking for any threats in the surrounding area.
As those minutes are counting down, what are you thinking of preparing?
I'm preparing for a shootout, and also getting as many people out as possible. So it's, multitasking in my thinking, just getting as many people out of these buildings as we can, and also ready to engage anybody that was not in this uniform.
You mentioned hearing another voice.
I was God. I'm not going to shy away from that. I am a spiritual person, and so I truly believe that when I do this job, I'm led by that voice. How I treat people, how I go about doing this job every day. That's what guides me, and I truly believe that that's what guided me in that sense, because I was literally getting ready to walk back toward that RV, and you watch the video, you can see that moment of clarity for me when I heard God say, "Go and check on topping." And so I was peeking around, looking like this, and then it's like, "No, turn around, go check on topping." And so I turn around and start walking in the opposite direction, and then 3 seconds later, boom. So, I'm not going to shy away from that, because that's what saved my life. That's what got me to see my kids and my wife on Christmas. And good to see you has a completely different meaning for me now. So.
Can we do 2 more questions about anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
How close were you Thursday compared to how close this group is now?
What do you mean close as far as?
Connected forever.
Yeah, obviously, I already had a genuine feeling for all of them, but of course this is going to tie us together for forever, for the rest of life. And so just, the love for them is even bigger now, and Christmas will never be the same for any of us. So.
Officer Hosey.
Yes, sir. If it's the woman I'm thinking of, she lived in 178. I remember knocking on her door. It was Cypus and I knocked on her door, scared the bejesus out of her. I told her that there was a threat in the area and that we needed her to evacuate. She said, okay, let me get my kids. And that kind of just like put my heart up in my throat. I don't have kids, but like I have cousins and nieces and people that I love that are small. So I'm thinking maybe like 1 or 2 kids. She ended up having 4 kids. And so as she's getting them out, and she's got a stroller and she's got 2 in there and then 2 helping her get stuff. And I'm asking her if there's anything like that I can help her with to help make this easier. She said no, she's okay, but she's being a little bit more insistent on like what's going on. And at that time I kind of tell her like there's a more serious threat and that's why we need you to go. So like I'm thankful that we were able to make contact with her and that she was awake and able to evacuate. Yeah. No, I mean, when something like this happens, it doesn't make any sense. And I was telling some other officers, like, if this is something you said would ever happen in Nashville, I would say that this was at the bottom of the list of anything that I thought would ever happen. And who knows why.
Did any of the officers find any evidence of shell casings, or did you even have time to look for that original shots fired call?
Not in between getting the call and then having to evacuate everyone. Where the shots fired call came from, we did not find any evidence of shots being fired. No shell casings, nothing like that. Anyone in the building that we made contact with said they didn't hear anything like that. So there was like the question that we raised was the loudspeaker that we heard playing gunshots to make it appear like shots had been fired. That was just a theory we came up with. We don't know if it actually happened or anything.
Had a question over here.
Yes, for Officer Lewin. You described the moment that you saw a man walking his dog. Have you seen, there's been surveillance video of that moment. Have you seen that video yourself?
No, ma'am, I have not.
How does that know? Because, I mean, you talk about how you guys have saved people's lives that day. How does that feel knowing that?
Overall, I don't know for what reason the gentleman or female, whoever it was that actually did this, gave the notice. I'm just grateful that we actually had time to try and help people clear out. I saw that gentleman. Gut instinct told me go get him and tell him to get inside, get his family, get out. And overall, I did that, and I'm just grateful that none of the shrapnel or anything like that hit me, him. I'm a big dog lover, so is dog too. So just very grateful that no one was seriously hurt. I personally do not know any of those circumstances.
One more question, please. One more. Yes, sir.
Was the sound coming from a loudspeaker outside of the RV or inside?
To me, it sounded like it was coming from inside the RV.
Through the window?
I don't know if they had like a mounted loudspeaker, kind of like our patrol cars do, to where it's in the grill or what, but I heard it coming from the RV itself. So, yes, you could hear it almost all the way down to Broadway and all the way up to Union almost. So, I'm sorry,
Had you seen the RV before during your patrols in the area?
No, I didn't notice it earlier in the night at all. And like I said, I noticed it when I first showed up, but with it being the holiday, I didn't think anything of it because people possibly visiting family.
Or even in past weeks?
No, I haven't seen it in past weeks or past nights even. I know there was one other over here.
You're lucky to be alive, officer.
Yes, I feel very lucky to be alive, say hello to my family, say I'm uninjured, as well as all the other officers. I'm very grateful for the quick response from fellow officers, NFD, and everyone else.
The person of interest.
Thanks, Tyler. Thank you very much.
Is the person of interest on the radar of the police department?
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to emphasize these officers volunteered to be with you this morning. They weren't ordered to be here, they volunteered. And for those of you who applaud, thank you all very much.